Well, greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, it is me, the sanctimoniously notorious RMB, here for Robservations live chat number 196. Robservations is, of course, the show about something. And you know what? Before I start, I've got dogs. I'm telling you, these dogs, they're here. They know what's up. You did this just because you knew I was going on, right? All right, come on, somebody come up here. Gilbert, you coming up here? Come up here. Gotta come up. Good boy. Look at that. Do I have this dog trained or what? There's a cookie for Gilbert and a cookie for Tallulah down here. Tallulah, you have a cookie too. You get another cookie. That's what you get. Tallulah gets her cookie. That's right. And you get a third cookie. Hey, you. I tolerate this up to a point. Give me a kiss, baby. Come on, give me a kiss. There you go. And then one more for Tallulah. All right, time to get down. You get down. Come on, Gilly. There you go. Say goodbye to everybody. Wave goodbye. Bye. There you go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm back. Sorry for that. But, it is kind of part of the show. Gilbert and Tallulah are part of the show. I think they could feel I was going on. Gilbert's waiting to see if you get. I mean, come on, 3 cookies. What more do they want? They're going to eat me out of house and home. These two. The gruesome twosome, the dynamic duo, as it were. Anyway, welcome to this, the 196th episode of Robservations, a show about something, brought to you by, as always, say it with me now, Lucky Tiger men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com and punch in PGS, if you buy any of their stuff when you check out, you get 20% off your order. But, ladies and gentlemen, to celebrate the beginning of football season, and let's hear it for the Seattle Seahawks preseason victory against Denver. Boy, they're looking good, the Jedi Knights of the Pacific Northwest. What has Lucky Tiger done? They are having the Lucky Tiger tailgating sweepstakes. I did say it was $750. Apparently, I was corrected. It's over $500 of tailgating stuff, including a grill. So anything you need to do when you tailgate, whether you're watching junior high, whether you're watching high school, college, or pro football, and you are tailgating, Lucky Tiger has got you covered. They're having a sweepstakes if you enter it. So if you go to getluckytiger.com or clubluckytiger.com and you enter their sweepstakes, you can win $500 worth of tailgating tools. As I said, they have not teamed up with a liquor company yet, but that could be coming. Let's hope Robservations gets a second sponsor, because I can think of nothing better than men who want to look good and feel great after they've been drinking. No, just kidding. But it would be cool. But Lucky Tiger is having a sweepstakes, tailgating sweepstakes, Lucky Tiger's tailgating sweepstakes, where you can get over $500 worth of goods so you and your friends can tailgate in Lucky Tiger style. You know what? They're gonna pay me for that. Lucky Tiger style. That is a new catchphrase I've just given them right now. Thank you for your sponsorship, Alan Murphy. Lucky Tiger style. Let's make it happen. Anyway, welcome to the show. There's a lot to talk about today, and no, I'm not going to talk about or wax rhapsodic about the fact that Avengers Endgame hits 4K today, because it does. And for those of us like myself who pre-ordered the Best Buy Steelbook months ago, because if you don't order Best Buy Steelbooks months and months in advance, you can't get them. It's not like you can walk into, well, maybe you can in whatever burg you live in, but in the greater Los Angeles area, man, if you don't order those discs in advance, you try and get them on day of release, they'll say not available within 75 miles of you, which means it's not available at all. But anyway, I'm not a Steelbook fiend. I have some Steelbooks, but collecting Steelbooks, by the way, not to take away from anybody who does, because Steelbook collecting is cool, but I did get Infinity War, the Steelbook. So I had to get Endgame in the Steelbook. You have to pre-order that stuff. So I did. And it came out today. Hooray for physical media. I have to tell you, something else happened. If you're watching the very fast demise of physical media. Physical media, to me, I equate it to climate change. We have no idea how fast it's coming down the pike, but it is. And the demise of physical media is coming down the pike faster than you realize. Disney, before Disney Plus, in advance of Disney Plus, has been taking just as Bill Hunt says, they're taking every bite at the apple they can. Bill Hunt of the digitalbits.com. They released 5 MCU 4K discs today. They released Iron Man 1, 2, and 3, and they released Thor and Thor: The Dark World. Now, I have probably half the MCU movies in 4K. I did not, believe it or not, I'll admit this to you right now. I did not go buy the Captain America movies on 4K. I was probably broke. I'm still broke. Let's face it. I'm in massive debt to one man in particular. But, you know, man's got to live too. So I didn't buy them when they came out. It was one of those things. I'll eventually go get them. But I feel like I have to get every 4K disc that comes out. However, if you read the review of Iron Man #1, it's only HDR10. It's not HDR10 plus, I don't believe, and it is, of course, an upscale from 2K. Anyway, I think the real blast from 4K is when they go back and they remaster something from the original camera negatives, such as what they did with the Matrix films this year, or what they did with Superman in 2001, and what they've done with Apocalypse Now. A 6-disc set, ladies and gentlemen, is coming out. I think it's 6 discs. 6 discs coming out on the 28th of this month. Apocalypse Now Final Cut could be the release of the year if they don't get Dawn of the Dead out this year, but maybe they will. I don't know. Anyway, good stuff happening. But Disney, I mean, they dropped The Lion King on 4K before the Lion King movie that's in theaters came out now, the original Lion King, with no fanfare. Disney used to like pimp this stuff like there's no tomorrow, but they're not. Physical media is going away, folks. It's going away faster than we ever thought. And like climate change, which is going to be upon us, even though it is upon us now, no one really believes it yet. Do they? I do. But anyway, another big thing happened today. Yes, my phone is ringing. My screen went out on my phone. It flickers. It's completely bricked. I think it's gone. It's unfortunately, I'm going to turn off the sound so no one can hear it. I cannot pick up my phone. I can't answer my phone because I can't see the screen. I have a at the Genius Bar. I've got an appointment. Anyway, CBS and Viacom. All of this is playing into today's main topic, which is, has in fact Disney fallen out of love with Star Wars? Well, CBS and Viacom basically own. Viacom is Paramount and CBS is CBS, basically. They have been apart since 2005. They have been apart for the entirety of J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot and Secret Hideout's reign over Star Trek, beginning in 2007, whenever they signed that deal. And they have announced that they're retying the knot. Viacom and CBS are becoming one again, just like V'ger and Captain Decker at the end of Star Trek The Motion Picture. This is from Deadline today. It's from Dade Haynes, writes this. Ending years of fitful discussions that played out against a backdrop of operatic corporate drama and media industry consolidation, CBS and Viacom have finally agreed to merge. The deal reunites them and pools assets such as Paramount Pictures, CBS, Showtime, and MTV in a new entity to be called Viacom CBS after 13 years of the two operating in separate media domains. Under the all-stock deal, Viacom shareholders will get a 0.59625 CBS shares for each non-voting share they own, which is an exchange ratio of a bit below Viacom's closing price last Friday. Of course, regulatory approval of the merger is expected in the next several months. The fair market value of the tie-up as of today is about $30 billion. So, more media companies consolidating. But why does that matter to us? Well, it matters to me because as a lifelong Star Trek fan, maybe we can see some more synergy, or actually any synergy, between the current regime that is running Star Trek and perhaps the feature film division. Not that we need anything like the last 3 Star Trek feature films that we've received. I know. But it plays into everything that I want to talk about in today's chat. Now, this chat was suggested. I just closed my information. Let me go back and get my information that I didn't mean to close, but I did. This chat topic was actually suggested by a longtime member of the Post-Geek Singularity community, an Imagination Connoisseur like yourself out there. And let me get to it, and I will tell you exactly. who suggested this. This also comes from the great Canada, the great white north. And this topic was suggested by Crosstalk, who writes in from Edmonton. And I like Edmonton, of course, as I've said before. Free Enterprise played on a double bill with the Americanization of Emily, and I met director Arthur Hiller when I was up there. Now, Crosstalk wrote this in, and he's talking about the Star Wars franchise. Now, before I read his letter, I want to talk about something. I want to talk about fandom and our beloved franchises that we love, and how most of the time, and I mean this with all great love and affection, because I'm a fan, all of you Imagination Connoisseurs are fans, but most of the time, 99% of what I listen to on the internet, and I watch lots of internet fan videos, are people talking out of their asses. I'm sorry to say, even me with my vast industry experience, everybody as a fan is really talking out of their asses. And they think they know things because they read things on the internet, and my God, they think they know everything. And I certainly do think I know everything. But I'm also quick to judge myself, and I realize I don't know as much as I thought I did. And when you think you know everything, then you stop thinking about it. You stop learning. But anyway, so here's the deal. And I'm going to use myself as an example. As a Star Trek fan, in my imagination, there is a certain compartment of my imagination where the Star Trek universe is a real place. Now, I might not have physically been to this place, but mentally, in my imagination, I have visited it frequently since I was about 5 years old. And being a real place, it has, like, I have been inhabiting this place in my imagination since I was about 5. You know, now that I'm middle-aged and will have one foot in the grave, I've spent an inordinate amount of time in my life existing in the Star Trek universe in my imagination. I've been there for, over 40 years. Over 4 decades I have spent immersed in this universe. And as I have lived and grown in this universe, as has the universe itself grown. Before, when I started in, there was only 79 hours of Star Trek. Even less if you really talk about the fact that each episode is 52 minutes long. That's all that existed when I started watching Star Trek. And while not all of it was very consistent, like they had things like the United Earth Space Probe Agency, and then in the second season, the United Federation of Planets was introduced. And so I would ask myself, even as probably a 6 or 7-year-old, what's the difference between the United Earth Space Probe Agency and the United Federation of Planets? It's not like I watched a 60-minute special on how the United Earth Space Probe Agency became the United Federation of Planets. So you use your imagination, and you're like, okay, these two organizations exist, somehow coexist. But anyway, it was an inconsistency. But within the confines of those 79 episodes, those kinds of things weren't necessarily inconsistent. You just hadn't been given the information you needed to draw a line from one to the other. But it seemed like it could happen because in real life, there are different organizations, and you don't always know what the link is between them. So in my mind, although I didn't know what it was called, that gave the Star Trek universe verisimilitude. And as I got older, things came out like the Franz Joseph Technical Manual and the blueprints of the Enterprise in 1975. Well, I could sit down and spread out those blueprints. Yes, wow, I discovered, hey, there's a bowling alley on the Enterprise. We never saw this in the show, although Kevin Riley mentions it in, I believe, The Naked Time. It's The Naked Time he mentions that. So we know canonically there is a bowling alley on the Enterprise. We just don't know where it was, but they drew the blueprints that showed where it was. Then the Franz Joseph Technical Manual had articles of the Federation. And I know none of this was not canonical, but everybody who was creating this stuff was doing their very best because they loved Star Trek to make it all work, to make it all make sense. And of course, we had 2 seasons of the animated series that Will Yang wrote about so eloquently. We had 22 episodes of the animated series. Now, as a kid, I didn't think to myself, well, this is not canonical. Of course it was canonical because Gene Roddenberry created the animated series. It had all the original voice actors with the exception of Walter Koenig, but he did write an episode, The Infinite Vulcan. And there was a lot of things in there. We met Captain Robert April, who was the first captain of the Constitution-class Enterprise before Pike took over. There was all kinds of things that felt canonical to me. And so it all grew up as I did. And that universe that my imagination was inhabiting would get bigger. And it seemed like it was great. Now, Franz Joseph did not sit down and create the blueprints or the technical manual because he was being paid gobs of money. I mean, he was making some money when they published it, but the people that bought it, it wasn't like it was going to be a gigantic hit, but it was, they made money. But people did things because they loved them. Because, frankly, how much money was there really to be gleaned or acquired making blueprints of the Starship Enterprise? Not a lot. But anyway, Star Trek, there was books that were published. Now, at this time, nobody was sitting there going, well, the books aren't canon. You didn't think of it that way. It was like, my God, there's a new Star Trek story. Even Kathleen Sky's novel Vulcan, which has a hot babe and Spock facing down giant ants, which was actually a riff on an AMT model kit of Spock facing down a three-headed snake. It was kind of the same thing, but I got it. It was a cheeky reference. I understood it even as a kid. But anyway, all of it was canonical. All of it was great. It was the only new Star Trek we were getting. And then, of course, we get to Star Trek, the motion picture. Gene Roddenberry came back, and everything that went into Star Trek, the motion picture was created by people that understood that there's now a Star Trek in-universe history. And they're trying to build off that. Of course, they had a mandate where you're going from the Star Trek on the small screen. Now it's going onto the big screen, and they're spending more money than almost any other movie ever made on this film. In the wake of Star Wars, in the wake of science fiction now back on the big screen, unlike ever before. So Star Trek, the motion picture, even though people are going to say, well, Rob, what about the Klingons? There was a lot about spoken, whether you believe that there's an Imperial Klingon race we'd never seen before. It didn't bother me because why not? There's different races in the Federation. And with Star Trek, the motion picture, even though you didn't see many in the finished film, they created a lot of alien races, even variations on the Andorians that you just didn't see, but they created them. So in my mind, when I first saw Star Trek, the motion picture, it did not bother me that the Klingons were much more alien in appearance. I just felt like, well, these are different Klingons because they're in the middle of Klingon space. They're attacking, they're investigating V'ger. It didn't bother me. I'm like, I got it. And I incorporated that into my, whatever my universe was. Oh, the Klingons have different races within them, just like we do. And Star Trek, the motion picture hammered that point home. But again, Star Trek, the motion picture was a risk. It was a roll of the dice, and it worked. So, and Star Trek wasn't the franchise that it was today, because if Star Trek, the motion picture didn't work, and there's a lot of people that think Star Trek, the motion picture was some kind of a box office flop. It was not. It was not a box office flop. It actually did quite well at the box office, and they were very happy with it. It's just the movie was incredibly expensive because they rolled in all of the development costs to the previous unmade Star Treks, such as Philip Kaufman's Planet of the Titans, which didn't get made, and the Star Trek Phase 2 television series, where they spent a lot of money commissioning 13 scripts, building sets, creating costumes. They rolled a lot of that. They were building a miniature. That was all of it was rolled into Star Trek, the motion picture. So anyway, the Star Trek franchise was not a franchise now that was living and breathing for 50 years. It was now 13 years old when Star Trek, the motion picture came out. That's it. Star Trek, the motion picture came out a decade after Star Trek finished its run on television and then became one of the biggest syndicated hits ever, beginning in 1972 when it went into strip syndication, which is unprecedented. Nobody ever seen this before. Star Trek conventions started to crop up, the animated series, and Star Trek became even more popular in syndication than it ever was when it was on television. So it was different. Star Wars, introduced, of course, May 25th, 1977. Out of the gate, Star Wars was a phenom. It was amazing. The whole world embraced Star Wars. It was, I've told the story before. I went to see it the Saturday after it opened, and there was a gigantic line all the way around the block, and I was left a quivering, crying, blubbering mess until my father took myself and Gardner Morelli to see The Car and Race with the Devil at the Coliseum Theater as a consolation prize, and I saw it the next day on Sunday, the 29th of May. Anyway, Star Wars out of the gate, for whatever reason, people just knew it was a monster hit. It became, at the time, the most successful movie ever made. And I know people are going to be like, well, you know, if you're adjusted for inflation, it hadn't beat Gone with the Wind, whatever. It was the most successful movie ever made at the time. So immediately, Star Wars was a gigantic monster hit. Everyone knows it became a huge merchandising bonanza with everything from beach towels to, of course, the action figures that we still get today. So Star Wars out of the gate was a money-making franchise, but even Star Wars after 1983, after Return of the Jedi, it skated for another couple of years. Pop culture is very fleeting, and Star Wars kind of went away in the latter half of the 80s. It was replaced by other things. And of course, they tried to turn every movie or everything that had everything had toys and tie-ins, but nothing was like Star Wars. I mean, there's a simple reason for that. I'll tell you why. Here's the Rob Burnett reason. And people will tell me, oh, there's other reasons. No, here's the reason. I'm going to tell you why. Do you know why the Star Wars toys were the most successful toys ever? Because you understood, and by the way, this is a kid thing. You could say the same thing about Star Trek, but Star Trek didn't appeal to children, even though I started watching it as a child. It didn't appeal to the mass of children that Star Wars did. When you watched Star Wars, even as a kid, you understood you were seeing basically a couple days in the life of a much larger universe. These characters had adventures before you met them. Certainly Han Solo did, and certainly Ben Kenobi did, and certainly Darth Vader did, and Grand Moff Tarkin. And they were going to have more adventures, the ones that survived anyway, later. So when you bought Star Wars toys, there was more to say. You could make up your own adventures. You know, you could do all of those things. Even your Ben Kenobi toy could come back from the dead. And that's why Star Wars toys were so successful. When Mego made Star Wars, or when Mego, who didn't get the Star Wars license, made black hole toys, like after the black hole was over, the Cygnus went through the black hole. There were no more adventures to be had. So what are you going to do? That's why superhero toys always worked. Planet of the Apes toys kind of worked until they stopped, you know. But it was always the Transformers, always going to have more adventures. He-Man, more adventures. You know, when you have you can't make a successful toy line from a product that ended. If the story ends in your mind, it's like, well, I can't play with this toy anymore. This person's dead. Ben Kenobi, though, really wasn't dead, so he could have more adventures, even in the Force Ghost afterlife that he inhabited. But anyway, be that as it may, Star Trek the Motion Picture led to more Star Trek movies, and Star Trek became a viable franchise. What is the big difference between the two? Well, Star Trek was the product of many different people. At first, it was, of course, the brainchild of Gene Roddenberry. But even back for the original series, there were writers like Gene Kuhn and Dorothy Fontana and David Gerrold who made, and a lot of other very talented writers, Samuel Peoples, Norman Spinrad, Theodore Sturgeon. I mean, there was a lot of Harlan Ellison. So Star Trek, even though it was the brainchild of one man, you had writers who were playwrights, novelists, short story writers. The great fantasists of the mid-20th century were writing Star Trek. Star Wars was pretty much the product of one guy, and then when he stepped aside, he brought in people like Lee Brackett, who was also a very celebrated science fiction writer, who gave way to Lawrence Kasdan. They wrote The Empire Strikes Back together. But so Star Wars was really overseen by one man. Star Trek, while overseen by one man, there was a lot more people that contributed to the success of Star Trek. But either way, there was a big difference when Star Trek came back in 1987, also with Gene Roddenberry. But really, it was Rick Berman who stayed with Star Trek for 18 years and 25 seasons of Trek. And the team that was in place with Star Trek was very cognizant of the fact that they were creating this universe that was living, breathing, and growing. So things like the design had an aesthetic. And the people that were working, at least in the art department and things like this, when they were making stuff, they were very conscious of the fact that Star Trek had a history, and they were trying to contribute to that history. And so for 25 seasons of Star Trek, there was a lineage and there was a continuum that they were building and adding to. So for 18 years, which by the way is pretty unprecedented, but for 18 years, you had this fictional universe being added to by the same people. So if you were a Star Trek fan, you could sit there and chart the growth and look at all of the design work and the things that they had done. So in my own head, in the own universe, the Star Trek universe that I inhabited, it was growing at a rate and in a way that the verisimilitude was retained. Now, when Star Wars came back in 1999, when The Phantom Menace came back, there was a lot of changes. There was a lot of aesthetic changes that were for a number of reasons. You had different designers come on board. Ralph McQuarrie, I believe, had passed away by then. You had like Doug Chiang, who was one of the chief designers, come in, and Lucas was going for something else. And I also think that Lucas believed that Star Wars was something that Star Wars fans didn't. I think we all grew up knowing that Star Wars was for the child in all of us, but Lucas believed that Star Wars was just for children, and he never quite grasped why adults loved it as well. So that's why the prequels are the way they are. But anyway, where we wind up is, I'm going to read this letter. Let me read this letter. Crosstalk's letter. Crosstalk writes in and says, "Hey, Rob, I hope you are having a great day today, and greetings from up here in Edmonton again. From the chats over the last month or so, I felt I needed to bring this point home again, as I consistently see people blaming this person for one thing or another. I know it's been talked to death already by you and many, many others. This is regarding Kathleen Kennedy and the folks who run things at LucasFilm over at Disney. I can't speak to everyone else, only for myself. However, I will try to put this into words why I am worried about the state of the Star Wars IP. For me, the political landscape of injecting politics into art, film, comics, TV, or otherwise, is not an issue. Art has always had elements of political overtones from the time in which it was created. Not all art is political. I understand this as some is just pure escapism, and there's nothing wrong with that, as that can be enjoyable as well. I have many guilty pleasures, such as Armageddon, Independence Day, Deep Blue Sea, and Top Gun, to mention a few. You know, ultimately, I wouldn't say any of those are necessarily guilty pleasures. I'd say Star Crash is a guilty pleasure, but even Armageddon. These movies are perhaps well crafted, but admittedly, they have amazingly terrible writing. I still love them, even though these movies have no political agenda or overtones. Wait a minute, you don't think Top Gun has a political overtone? Political agendas aside, my issue with Lucasfilm leadership really has nothing to do with Kathleen Kennedy as a person, but as a studio that doesn't seem to actually love Star Wars. Does this mean that a studio head has to love the movies they make? Not at all. But let's be honest here. The only property that Lucasfilm has had to deal with right now is Star Wars. We aren't seeing a series of Willow, Labyrinth, or Howard the Duck movies, although I'd be so all over that. So does it make sense that the head of Lucasfilm should love Star Wars? I'm not sure. There is much more to being a studio head than overseeing story or how it fits into the established lore of the universe the movies take place in. And this brings me to why I think people are off base, blaming Kathleen Kennedy for any of the story and universe issues with Star Wars, as far as I understand them. Maybe she has more to do with the stories than I am aware, but I tend to think not. She helps, perhaps picks the people that create these films and shows, but I'm not sure how much she has to do with the actual crafting of them. Now, she might even have an overarching political agenda that I might or might not agree with, but something has been lost along the way, and it shows on screen. I am way more of a Star Wars fan than a Star Trek fan, even though I love Trek as well. But I've read everything Star Wars, not the new novels, down to the old West End Games RPG books. We used to play pen and paper Star Wars for years. But you are, Rob, with Star Trek is pretty much how I am with Star Wars, and I see the same sort of thing happening to the franchise I have loved my whole life. They, Disney and Lucasfilm, seem to be destroying disrespecting, or just ignoring what came before in favor of pushing the new, which seems to be simply for marketing and merchandising money. From a business perspective, with a focus on short-term profit, this makes sense, as it did for Bad Robot with the Trek franchise. In the long term, however, the damage has been done. This short-term profit thinking has now permeated so much of the franchises we love that story and universe coherency take a back seat to pretty visuals and ham-fisted political messaging. Again, political overtones don't bother me. Let's be honest, the Galactic Empire is largely based on the Third Reich. I mean, Lucas took certain notes from Triumph of the Will. But when that political message overrides good characters and writing, I have an issue. To me, the new characters are pretty hit and miss, but it's the feel of the new movies that is so much different than the Star Wars I grew up with. I don't know. Maybe I'm being an old get-off-my-lawn fuddy-duddy and looking for things that aren't there. All art is subjective. Don't believe that. It isn't. But like you with Star Trek, Rob, I feel they dropped the ball when they didn't mind the amazing expanded universe for great characters and stories before writing whatever it is we have now. Sorry for the length of this letter, but I wanted to just clear this up. I don't think there's enough evidence to believe that Kathleen Kennedy has anything to do with the state of why I don't like Star Wars characters and stories as they are being presented now. Other than Rogue One, a Star Wars story, I actually like that one. Keep up the good show, Rob, and wish all of my fellow Post-Geek Singularity people a great day, afternoon, or evening. Crosstalk. Well, yes, we've talked about this online ad infinitum. Everybody has talked about this for so long. We've been going back and forth, and even on this show, I've talked about this for a long time. But here's what I want to state. I'm going to give you the answer. Has Disney fallen out of love with Star Wars? The answer to that question is quite simple. No. No, they haven't. No, they haven't fallen out of love with Star Wars at all, because Star Wars has provided them two of the highest grossing movies in the Disney pantheon. That would be Rogue One, that would be The Last Jedi, and of course, The Force Awakens. All movies that grossed over $1 billion. And nobody falls out of love with a franchise that brings them that much money. People would say, well, Rob, what about Solo, a Star Wars story? Nope. See, here's the thing. As I said, fandom has their collective heads up their asses, and I include myself in this. I'm talking out of my ass right now. Really. But I will say, all of this is about money. And the Star Trek franchise, everybody who's in charge of the Star Trek franchise right now, they don't care what came before. It's not their Star Trek. It has nothing at all to do with them. J.J. Abrams understands what the Starship Enterprise looks like. He knows what it looks like. The image, the profile, the silhouette of the Starship Enterprise is unmistakable. It's an iconic spaceship we've been watching since 1966. It's had different iterations, certainly. But before J.J. Abrams took over in Star Trek 2009, when he released his movie, the Starship Enterprise only looked like a few things. We saw its lineage from, well, let's face it, I'll include the NXO one, the Enterprise from Enterprise, but the Enterprise from the 1966 Star Trek, the refit Enterprise, we saw the Enterprise B in Star Trek Generations, we saw the Enterprise C introduced in the third season Next Generation episode, yesterday's Enterprise. We saw the Enterprise D, of course, in the entirety of the Next Generation series until its demise in Generations, the feature film. Then we were introduced to the E. And then there's been different iterations in Star Trek Online. There's been, the J. We've seen different iterations, but we know what the Enterprise looks like. But basically, the iconic Enterprise from the Star Trek television series, 1966. Everybody knows from non-canonical sources, but even in the making of Star Trek, that the components used to build the Enterprise were assembled on Earth, hoisted into orbit, and assembled in orbit, because the way the Enterprise is designed, it was not meant to operate within the gravity well of a planet. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been designed that way. It's not aerodynamic. How is it supposed to stay aloft? So it wasn't designed to be that way. It wasn't designed to ever be built on the ground. It was designed to be built in space or in a low gravity environment, but certainly not on the ground. When J.J. Abrams took over as head of the Star Trek franchise, Bad Robot took it over. They thought they were going to have Star Trek TV shows and Star Trek movies and Star Trek merchandising. It didn't work out that way. But when he took over Star Trek, he's like, look, man, I get how the Enterprise looks. But he had never read Star Trek novels. He had never buried his head in the Franz Joseph Technical Manual. He thought his company was taking over Star Trek, lock, stock, and barrel. They didn't care what came before. They figured out a way. We're going to set it in an alternate universe. And I'll give it up for Kurtzman and Orci. They figured out a clever way. Orci was a big fan. How can we start over with Star Trek in an interesting canonical way? So they created the Kelvinverse. But J.J. Abrams, there was nothing. He just wanted to make the Enterprise look cool. Unlike what, say, Andy Probert was doing when they were and Mike Miner was doing when they were redesigning the Enterprise for Star Trek The Motion Picture. It was all about form and function. How can we make this real? How can we give the Enterprise verisimilitude? J.J. Abrams never thought that ever. He's like, I want a scene where Chris Pine can roll up in his motorcycle and see the Enterprise on the ground and see his future. Whether that made sense in the long history of Star Trek did not matter to J.J. Abrams. He didn't care. Like, why should he? Why? It's not his Star Trek. He's going to make Star Trek the way he wants it. That's what Paramount's mandate was as well. It's like, we'll reinvent Star Trek. And unfortunately, in doing that kind of decision-making gives you, well, the Enterprise we saw being built on the ground in Star Trek 09, and then, hey, let's stick it underwater. J.J. Abrams has a weird fetish about having spaceships working within planetary environments. The greatest scene in The Force Awakens of the Millennium Falcon is it's flying through the crashed remnants of a Star Destroyer in The Force Awakens. When do we see X-Wings? We see a fleet of X-Wings on the ground, flying over water. Nothing, it's weird to me. And we'll have the great battles happen, and wind up in San Francisco. Let's have a starship crash in San Francisco. Because, I don't understand. It's sure we had a space battle in the darkness, but it's a weird thing. I don't get it. But so when these new people take over franchises, and these franchises have now become franchises, Star Trek became a franchise for CBS and Viacom, and Star Wars has now been purchased as a franchise by Disney. Disney loves Star Wars. They love it. They want it to be successful. They're willing to make sure that it has everything they need to make it successful. They're going to throw ungodly sums of money at it. Disney loves Star Wars. But here's the thing. They don't love Star Wars the way we do. The people at Disney, the extent of their Star Wars fandom goes as far as a spreadsheet is concerned. Now, Kathleen Kennedy, everyone disses on Kathleen Kennedy. Kathleen Kennedy, as a producer, has been involved in all of your favorite movies since E.T. in 1982. People are like, well, she's not a creative producer. That's true. She is not a writer, and she is not a director. What she is there to do is facilitate what the writer and director needs, if they're the same person, or if they're not, find the best people to write the scripts and then find the best people to direct the films. But a producer is supposed to do that. That is their job. And in Kathleen Kennedy's case, she was blessed to work with people like Lucas and Spielberg and Robert Zemeckis and her own husband, Frank Marshall. A lot of great people that have been making great movies, some of your favorite movies, for the better part of 4 decades now. But it's not her job to dictate necessarily what's happening. You know whose job it is? Whose job it is to dictate those things? Disney. Disney comes along and they're like, okay, we're going to spend $4 billion to buy this franchise. Now, on a spreadsheet, they're not thinking to themselves from a corporate level. They're looking at Star Wars holistically as a brand. It's made $22 billion worth of toy sales at the time they bought it. Staggering. They've already had, there's already a Star Wars ride in Disneyland. They've had a long association with Lucasfilm through Indiana Jones and Star Wars. And so they're thinking, oh, we got Star Tours, that's a ride. They're not thinking as Star Wars fans. They're not understanding, what does it mean that the Sith, there's a master and an apprentice? No one at Disney corporate is going, I wonder if we could bring back Knights of the Old Republic. They're not thinking about, oh, canonically, what about all these expanded universe books? How do they work with the Dark Horse comics? They're not thinking about those things. They're not thinking from a fan perspective at all. All they know is that, well, we can't make new Star Wars movies with Luke, Han, and Leia. Maybe we'll do a pass the torch thing, but we need to take Star Wars into the next 40 or 50 years. So Disney corporate, and this is also true of any franchise that's being purchased, they don't sit there and think the relationship. They're like, I wonder what the fans are going to think about this. They don't, because even The Phantom Menace was a very successful movie, and fans hated that. People still showed up. From a corporate standpoint, nobody cares. They bought the franchise. They're looking at spreadsheets. So then the job is, how do we reinvent this franchise and make it ours and continue the legacy of Star Wars for another 40 years of success? That's what they're thinking. Now, if you're like myself, and I am, I'm a huge Star Wars fan as well. I certainly was when I was younger. I tuned out after Return of the Jedi because, frankly, Star Wars let me down with that movie. That doesn't mean I didn't love Star Wars. When the Thrawn books came out in the early 90s, when the Dark Empire comic book series was released, I jumped all over that. I couldn't wait. I've always been a Star Wars fan. It left my imagination the way Star Trek has always stayed in my imagination, really until 2009, because it was apparent to me that the part of my fandom that I enjoyed had been closed off and finished with the end of the Berman era of Star Trek. The J.J. Abrams era of Star Trek, it wasn't just the Star Trek that I knew and loved. It was a dumbed down mass market version of Star Trek that was just not for me anymore. And it's continued to be that for the last 10 years. But I understand when Bad Robot took over, what they were looking to do. They were going to reinvent the Star Trek franchise and make it theirs. That's what people do. It's not like it's sacrosanct like Lord of the Rings. And I know people are going to be like, oh, what about the lack of Tom Bombadil? It wasn't that sacrosanct. They changed those things. Yes, but even look, I know a lot of Tolkien heads are always bitching and moaning if the movies weren't perfect. But what we got with those 3 Lord of the Rings movies was far beyond anything any Tolkien fan, and I grew up a Tolkien fan. I read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. I read the Silmarillion when it first came out. I didn't much like the Silmarillion, to be honest. It was interesting though, but I read the whole thing. But those movies retained the spirit of Tolkien as much as they could, and in grand fashion. And of course, everybody loves those films. I think it's one of the most successful film trilogies, if not the most successful film trilogy ever made from purely a movie making standpoint. But Star Trek, everybody has wanted to change it and make it into theirs. Whether it makes sense that the Enterprise was built on the ground, which it doesn't, or it could go underwater, doesn't either. That's what we're getting now. So it's not my Star Trek anymore. I bitch and moan and complain about it, but it's okay. As I get older and close to the grave, I don't spend as much time poring over my Star Trek blueprints as I used to. So I can let people. I mean, it's fun to bitch and moan and complain about Star Trek Discovery, but I can let the new generation, if they want to like it, they can like it. It's up to them. But the Star Wars franchise, as it exists now, once it's owned by a corporation, the corporation's job is to use their assets, exploit them, and make money. It's very interesting watching all of these op-ed pieces talking about how Star Wars Galaxy's Edge is a failure. And a lot of people who I respect in the nerd space are like, because it doesn't feel authentic. Chris Gore published an article yesterday or over the weekend on Film Threat where he talks about the 5 ways he thinks you could fix Galaxy's Edge. I think what Disney did under their mandate, they gave us a new corner of the Star Wars universe, just like with Star Tours. They created a new part of the Star Wars universe that was unique to Disney. The whole thing that you could get on these transport ships and find yourself in familiar Star Wars territories was, I thought, pretty ingenious. But they also, when you went to Disneyland, you felt a certain verisimilitude. They gave you something new that was not canonical Star Trek that worked, or Star Trek that was not canonical Star Wars that worked with canonical Star Wars. And they did the same thing with Galaxy's Edge. They created this new world, the Black Spire outpost, in the Outer Rim, Batu, a new world that they're writing books about. And I thought that was a smart way to go because it allowed every viewer or every visitor to the park to be part of a new thing in Star Wars. Now, Chris Gore said it was too much like fan fiction. I think that was a good thing because when you visit Batu, the experience you have there is not like you're not going into a movie that already happened. You're not like going to the Battle of Hoth. You already saw that. You're going someplace new that is part of the Star Wars universe, so it furthers the experience. The problem I feel with Galaxy's Edge is that there's nothing really to do there except spend lots of money. A $200 lightsaber, $100 droid, expensive food. And I get it. And there's only one ride, but there's not a lot of other stuff to do. But I think what they were trying to do is a good thing. And the idea that they're trying to expand the Star Wars universe with things like The Mandalorian, I think The Mandalorian is going to blow everybody away and make people fall in love with Star Wars all over again. But their mandate from a corporate standpoint in making new Star Wars with new characters is, from a corporate standpoint, smart. They have to do that. The problem is they didn't take the risk they needed to take by allowing a creative team to really go nuts. And there's Kathleen Kennedy was the one who sits there and goes, she would have been able to sort of rein people in and say, no, Kathleen Kennedy was a great hire. George Lucas handpicked her, and I think she would have been a great person, and she probably was. In a way, they tried to do that. The problem was the characters that they've created, I don't think were unique enough or interesting enough to capture the imaginations of longtime fans. We love Star Wars, so we accepted them. But Poe Dameron and Rey and Finn and Kylo Ren are not unique enough where we could embrace them as new. They are variations on a theme. And I think The Mandalorian, you could say, okay, is a variation on Boba Fett. But the best Star Wars in my mind that has been created is what they did with the Clone Wars. It didn't start out that way, but it became that way. And with Rebels, and you have a group of core, really hardcore Star Wars fans that are also great writers. Even my friend Steve Melching, who's deeply steeped in Star Wars, has worked on the Star Wars animated shows, and they've done great things with the universe, I think. And they needed to take more of a page from that with the movies. Anyway, I'm gonna jump over and see what people are saying before I come back to this, because I have a lot of letters and a lot of I'm rambling. I'm rambling on. Wow, there's a lot of everybody's talking. This is great. So CJ Dunn says, I did, but I'm a busy guy. Can't catch the live show often. I wanted you to hear it. I love you, Rob. Oh, that was from yesterday. Emil Johnson says, will JJ Rabbit or the other FX movies hurt the brand? Emil, I look, I don't think the Star Wars brand is hurt, despite everybody's dissatisfaction with Last Jedi. I think that the Rise of Skywalker is handicapped by all of the decisions of this new trilogy. As I've said before, they needed to give our old characters, they never put our old characters all together in one movie, let them have an adventure and pass the torch. That was their big mistake. They should never have not done that. And now they can never do that because Carrie Fisher is no longer with us. But if Rise of Skywalker, it might end in grand fashion. It might be great, but they're still going to be fighting the fact that these characters have not permeated the cultural zeitgeist the way the original characters have. And it was a big mistake from a corporate decision to do something like that. Again, I belabor this point, but if you want to know how to do something, look no further than Creed. Creed was the way to do it. You know, you have new characters, Adonis Creed, that has ties to the old characters. You tell a new story about Adonis Creed, but you make Rocky Balboa a central figure. Now, you could say, well, they did that with Leia and they did that with Han Solo. No, they didn't. They didn't give Han Solo a very good story. His only purpose, Han Solo's only reason for being in The Force Awakens was to die. And that was a mistake. They did not give Han Solo a story at all. They didn't give him a story. And that was a mistake. Anyway, corporate mandate, corporate decisions. CJ Dunn did say friendly reminder to stay on that surprise. Yes, sir, CJ, I will. Mark C is here. Mark C says, $5 bet John Campea comes back with a Canadian cough. Maybe so. But you know what? I get a cough a lot of the time when I go to Seattle and come back here. It's this desert air. Fergal Kelly says, forgot the preseason Seahawks, all the Ireland GAA hurling final. Really? Is on this Saturday or Sunday, the fastest field sport in the world. Ask Josh Prey. I'm not familiar with that. CJ Dunn says, how the fuck do you have 2 unlikes already, Rob? You just started. Well, there are people, I suspect I know who they probably are, who go every day to dislike my chats. And I actually take that as a point of pride, that people watch me and care enough about what I'm doing to go dislike my chats. And that's fine. But I would like to remind everybody, if you like these chats, please hit like. It's good for my YouTube analytics. Subscribe, hit the little bell so you know when I go back on again. Dieter Bastian says, sorry to say this, Rob, the Endgame Steelbook cover is unfortunately bad. The Hulkbuster and Thor from Infinity War, really? It's available in a lot of countries, just saying, in Germany as a 4K or a 3D. Oh, I agree with you, dude. Dieter, I didn't even look to see what the cover was when I ordered it, but it's a lousy cover. It really is lousy. I just got it to go with my Endgame or my Infinity War disc. So, yeah, I think it's a bad cover. And, yeah, I hate the fact that over the last couple of Marvel movies, I mean, actually not the last couple of years, I've had to double buy the 3D versions from the UK. And that's why I really appreciated the Alita Battle Angel disc. The 4K disc came with the 3D disc. God love James Cameron. CJ Dunn says, is it ready? No, CJ, it's going to take a while longer. You're going to have to sit tight for a while longer. Not anytime soon, just so you know. Willow Yang says, I forgot to ask yesterday during the Hannibal discussion, but which version of Hannibal do you like more? Anthony Hopkins or Mads Mikkelsen? Don't forget Brian Cox in Michael Mann's Manhunter. Ultimately, I have to say, as much as I like Anthony Hopkins, when I first saw Silence of the Lambs, I was bothered by how over the top he was. If you watch Brian Cox's portrayal, he was the first Hannibal Lecter on screen in Michael Mann's Manhunter. His portrayal was different, but I think Mads Mikkelsen, after 3 seasons of Hannibal, became the best Hannibal. Honestly, I totally believe that. Stubble McShave says, I always liked Worf's non-answer to the appearance of the Klingons on their homage episode, Trials and Tribulations. They are Klingons, and it is a long story. I love that. It's great. Alexander Wilson says, Disney has fallen out of love with Star Wars as Apple has fallen out of love with the iPhone. I swear fanboys live in a delusional world sometimes. Well, Alexander, good to have you here. I couldn't agree more. Disney loves Star Wars. They've committed unbelievable resources to it, and it's going to continue on and grow. And I think everybody's going to love The Mandalorian. I really do. Dan V900 says, the most underreported story when it comes to Star Wars is the fact that book sales have tanked since Disney bought it. The EU were consistently New York Times bestsellers. The current canon books aren't. That's a fair point. I don't know about the sales figures of the books, but yeah, I think one of the reasons that the Star Wars novels did well is because the fans of the Star Wars novels loved the expanded universe. And some of them were great, some of them weren't. But there was a real effort to put out a canonical breathing universe. The new Star Wars, Disney got rid of all of that, which I think is kind of a mistake. I understand why, because when they decided to make Force Awakens Episode 7, it contradicted everything that they had already published in the books. Now, in my mind, what I would have done if I was chosen to run Star Wars, all of those books were owned by Lucasfilm. I would have gone in and I would have taken elements from all the books, cherry-picked them as it were, and used them as a springboard. You didn't have to copy them exactly, but characters like Mara Jade and Grand Admiral Thrawn, Star Wars fans knew those things, and the people that weren't Star Wars fans could have been shown those things, and you would have done. I mean, Dark Empire was great. The Thrawn novels, not all of them, it wasn't, the Thrawn trilogy wasn't perfect, but combining all of the stuff that you already had would have given you a great series of novels. But you know what? When you're making deals, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. And when J.J. Abrams, here's what people do not understand. They do not get this. When you are hired to make, when you're working on Star Wars, you get as much as you can, when you can, and you try and carve out as much as it becomes about money. What you can, when you can, how you can. It was what Jimmy Fallon said in Almost Famous, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. But that's what happens. So when Bad Robot came in, their eyes were bulging. C-3PO has a red arm. The Millennium Falcon has a rectangular dish. TIE fighters are no longer that gray-blue. They're black. X-Wings are black. We're going back to the McQuarrie designs, but we own them. Anything that we put in, anything that Bad Robot put into their Star Wars movies, they get to carve out a piece for themselves. Why no R2-D2? Because we're going to create BB-8. The reason that they did not focus on our classic characters is because, look, I don't know whether recent reports are true that they have to pay a license fee to Lucas for using Luke, Han, and Leia and Lando and I don't think that's true, actually. I think they bought it lock, stock, and barrel. They either bought Star Wars or they didn't. I don't necessarily think I could be wrong, but you don't spend $4 billion and then still have to pay a licensing fee. So I don't buy these reports. Maybe they're true. I don't know. But Disney, those were old characters. Everybody wants to make them new. And when you change the Millennium Falcon and give it a rectangular dish, that means every Lego set. But it's interesting because Lego sets have both. But it becomes lucrative. And when you take over a franchise, Bad Robot thought when they took over Star Trek, they were going to be able to have Star Trek TV shows and do everything they wanted to do, including controlling the merchandising. The first thing that they wanted CBS to do was no longer sell old Star Trek merchandise. And even the video game they made, they cut bait, they left. And with Star Wars, they were hoping not to do that. And they wanted Disney was very happy to give them a piece of the pie because J.J. Abrams, that's what they do. Look at what J.J. Abrams got Warner Brothers to give him, like a $500 million deal. This is all about money. You have to understand, nobody cares about your fandom. The thought is all fans are going to show up. I don't care how many people are going to boycott The Last Jedi. You know how many crying little fanboys are not going to go see Rise of Skywalker? Zero. However you've bitched and moaned and complained about The Last Jedi, if you want to protest, I don't care. You are going to go see The Rise of Skywalker. Just like I will watch any kind of garbage Star Trek they're going to put out. We are lying. You're lying to yourself and you're lying to the public if you say, I'm not going to go see the new Star Wars movie because I hated The Last Jedi. Come on, man. I'm a big fan too. I hated Return of the Jedi. I was first in line to Phantom Menace. I tried to get Daniel Alter to save me a line, and you can see him in Star Wars. You can see me going up to Daniel Alter, who's months in advance in front of the Village Theater in Westwood. I'm like, dude, save me a seat. I mean, come on. This weird thing, Fano, I'm going to boycott him. No, we're not. I defy you to find me one fan. Well, now they will because I've said it. I've thrown down the gauntlet. We're all Star Wars fans. If there's a Star Wars movie that comes out, no one's not going to go see it. Now, you might not be as excited. Like I don't have a lot of excitement to see Rise of Skywalker. I was very excited to see Force Awakens, even though J.J. Abrams made horrible Star Trek movies. I still was very, very excited to see Star Wars. I realized in the first 5 minutes of Force Awakens, I'm like, oh, this isn't going to be good. But, it's fine. When Last Jedi was coming out, my enthusiasm was not curtailed. I didn't like Spectre. I loved every single James Bond movie. I love the franchise. I mean, I haven't loved every single James Bond movie. This girl I used to date, Mary Forrest, she used to say to me, she'd be like, why do you get so excited for these James Bond movies when you know half the time you're going to be disappointed? I'm like, because they're freaking James Bond movies. I love James Bond. I love Star Wars. I love Star Trek. I watch every episode of Star Trek hoping it's going to be good. Just like we're all hoping Rise of Skywalker is going to be good. We all hope in our hearts that they redeem themselves and they make the most kick-ass movie ever. Whether Rey is going to raise up parts of the Death Star using her ridiculous force powers that she didn't earn or didn't develop. I know. I'm just saying that for clicks. But we all love this stuff. We're all going. Now, the book sales, Disney made some I think, dumb choices because there are fans. And what I don't understand is if something isn't broken, why fix it? I was a Star Trek consultant for Viacom in the mid-90s. And there was the thought DC Comics was publishing Star Trek comics. And they were doing a fantastic job with their Star Trek line. From their hardcover graphic novel that Chris Claremont wrote to their adaptation of The Ashes of Eden, the Shatner novel that he wrote with Judy and Gar Reeves-Stevens, to their ongoing Star Trek series and their Next Generation series and things like the Modala Imperative, which is a miniseries. DC was killing it as far as the Star Trek comics were concerned. But some corporate mandate, somebody up on high said, why should Warner Brothers, which is a different company than we are, why should they be publishing Star Trek comics? And so they decided to take the Star Trek franchise away from DC and give it to Marvel. This is on my watch as a Star Trek consultant. I wrote like a 20-page, I don't even have a copy of it. I wish I did. A 20-page impassioned plea why they shouldn't do this. Why would you do that? And so what did they do? They took the Star Trek franchise away from DC for corporate reasons and gave it to Marvel. I love Marvel. Love Marvel Comics, been collecting them all my life. But they were not a good fit for the Star Trek franchise. And funny enough, my favorite of the comics they published was the Captain Pike comic they published. I like that the most. But they Marvelized the Star Trek comics. The people that were working at DC, people like Peter David, they had Star Trek novelists, and then it was a short-lived stint at Marvel with Star Trek. Didn't work out for them. But that was a corporate decision. Corporate decisions sometimes. Let's kill the extended universe, because if we did that, we're going to tell those stories ourselves with J.J. Abrams. Look, what they should have done, to be honest, from a fan perspective, they should have hired someone and said, hey, why don't you guys go and look into all of these great stories, all of the best of the EU. Just Google, what are the best Star Trek or what are the best Star Wars novels post Return of the Jedi? And then you'll get a list. And you do have characters like Jason Solo, and you do have Mara Jade, and you do have all of this stuff that already happened that is known. And so you're going to adapt novels that Lucasfilm already owns. Why not? Why would you not do that? Well, because, it's Hollywood. You want to create something that's your own. Everybody wants to come in and make it theirs. Got to make it mine. I'm not going to go use these. Who are tie-in novelists anyway? Who cares? We're not going to write those things. I'm not going to use. I'm a filmmaker. Well, as anyone who has read Star Trek novels their whole lives, like I have, can tell you, when you read certain Star Trek novels, the Star Trek novelists that are writing them, such as, let's see, I have one right here. One of my favorite Star Trek novelists is Christopher Bennett. He wrote a sequel to Star Trek: The Motion Picture. He has a new book that hadn't published a classic Star Trek novel in years. A couple of years. He published The Captain's Oath. This book's dope. It's not even about Kirk on the Enterprise. And Christopher Bennett is a massive Star Trek fan. So when he's writing his Star Trek novels, just like Diane Duane, just like the great David Mack, just like Peter David, these people are so steeped in the lore that when they're writing these books, and the best of them, I'm not saying they're all tie-in novels are great, but these are people that have really thought about the Star Wars franchise. And when you read these books, there is total verisimilitude. And it blows my mind that they don't go, how any franchise, why, if you're going to make an Alien versus Predator movie, Did somebody not think to themselves, Dark Horse Comics published a great Aliens versus Predator miniseries. Why don't we go adapt that? Why? Because there's a hierarchy in Hollywood. You know, movies are up here and TV are up here. Anybody else, you work in comics, pshaw. Well, now there's crossover, but nobody's gonna go consult the guy or the girl who wrote the tie-in comic to the Aliens versus Predator comic and give that the time of day. And then we ended up getting the AVP that we have now. But if they had made that first Dark Horse Aliens versus Predator series, that could have been a great, hell, it still could be. If I was running Disney, I'd be like, hey, man, let's go make an Aliens versus Predator movie and let's go adapt the Dark Horse comic. The same way that my boy Kevin Feige goes and looks at, say, Ed Brubaker's run on the Winter Soldier on Captain America. And that's where they find these things. But anyway, look, I've been going on and on and on for like over an hour about this. Disney loves Star Wars. The problem is they're beholden to their corporate culture and how corporations work. And they're going to pick people to work on these projects based on their box office and previous work. That's the only way they can do it. You can't, when you're talking about making a $200 million movie. And by the way, they tried. Kathleen Kennedy, to her very great credit, she tried. She tried hiring new emerging talents like Colin Trevorrow, but they hired him because of Jurassic World. That was a great hire. Then his second film comes out after Jurassic World, actually his third movie, and it doesn't do well. Then suddenly it's thrown into question. You know, Josh Trank, after Chronicle, Josh Trank, look at that. Look at what this guy did. Let's hire him. Fantastic Four comes out, and you know, Lord Miller, 21 Jump Street, 22 Jump Street, hot filmmaking duo. You know, why not? That was a smart hire. Kathleen Kennedy was doing a good job, but it wasn't. The problem was they were using the spreadsheet method of hiring people, and they were not thinking to themselves, I would go and find, it's like what Warner Brothers did with Patty Jenkins. Patty Jenkins, if you look at her career before for Wonder Woman, she was able to get the Eileen Wuornos story Monster made and got Charlize Theron an Oscar. That was a good hire. That was against the grain. That was a smart hire. But when you're dealing with Star Wars, you got to go with tried and true people that you can trust, people like J.J. Abrams who are beloved. And the things that fans would think are obvious are not so obvious when there's that much money involved. And by the way, if you were in charge of Star Wars and you're a big fan, you would do the same thing, because if you lost money, if Force Awakens made $0, if it turned out to be a disaster because you hired, Harmony Korine to direct the latest Star Wars movie because you wanted it to be edgy and different, and it was a disaster, where would Star Wars be today? Anyway, CJ Dunn sends more. I'm going to have to agree with you, Rob. IDGAF. I don't give an F about the new Star Wars characters. I did, however, love Rogue One. Well, first of all, what was interesting about Rogue One was, and while I think the problem with Rogue One is that all the characters are underdeveloped, you know, if you look at the Great Men on a Mission movie, Rogue One should have been, I think, a half an hour longer, and you should have seen all those characters. You should have seen the mining operation for the Kyber crystals and our two great characters see their downfall, see the Empire take over, do whatever they did, learn about those characters. And Rogue One, I think, works because even though to me it's only half great, it has a great ending. You love all the characters, you love the actors playing them, and it's a pretty cool movie. And it works. And and again, where did the idea for Rogue One come from? It came from a special effects artist, one of the great special effects artists who's worked at Lucasfilm and worked on Star Wars for a long time. A true fan came up with that idea internally. There's no way I think Disney would have come up with that idea. That was too much. Let's tell the story of the band of rebels that got those, who stole the plans to the Death Star initially. What a great idea. And it wouldn't have, I don't think it would have happened. A corporate mandate would have been like, no, it's too close to we got to do something new. I'll tell you my own experience. Bill Hunt and I came up with a pitch. I have a friend that has ties to ITV, which is a British film company, British entertainment company. They own the rights to Space 1999 and UFO, Jerry Anderson's first live action series UFO that I adore. Bill Hunt and I came up with a pitch for UFO. And it's set in the present day, a little actually in the near future, in the mid-2020s. But our pitch, and I thought our pitch was great, but when it was presented through this person I know to ITV, it came back that we, in our pitch, we said that the original UFO TV series happened. It was canonical history to our new pitch. And the new UFO TV series takes place in 1980, but it covers the ground between 1970 and 1980. And we used it all as backstory for our new series. So it's canonical. So the whole thing is that we wanted to, the way UFO showed us a retro future, the future of 1980 as viewed through the lens of 1969, we were going to continue with that idea. The people at ITV felt that we leaned too heavily into the past with UFO, even though we didn't. You don't see the past. We refer to characters, but it wasn't going to be overt. We were going to bring back Wanda Ventum, Benedict Cumberbatch's mother, to play her character if she would still do it, even if she was 90. The same way they used Diana Rigg from the Avengers in Game of Thrones to bring back Wanda Ventum to play Colonel Virginia Lake. We wanted to do that, and if you'd never seen UFO, you wouldn't know what we were doing because she was part of a different organization, and they didn't like it. You know, it came back. Even my friend Zach Stentz, who we were doing it with, he's like, "You guys are relying too heavily on the old stuff." And we're like, "No, it's not part of our pitch at all." But it happened, and they want things that are all new. So, CJ Dunn also says, "Agreed, Rob. You got to be doing something right if people just come to hate." Well, yeah. Look, there are people that think I'm a monumental douchebag for doing these chats. There are people that I'm sure think it takes away my credibility as a filmmaker, or it takes away my credibility in Hollywood, or is whatever. Look, I set out in 2015 to come be a guest on John Schnepp's show, Collider Heroes. I didn't realize I would become a series regular on that. And after he passed away, I didn't think I would stay on the internet. John Campy asked me to go on his show, and then people started asking me to do a show. So I'm doing a show. I do this show because I have fun. We're building a really cool community here, and that's why I do it, because it's great. And I get to talk about all of this stuff, the thing is, I think about all this stuff all day long, all the time. So in a way, it's almost like I get to get all of this stuff out, and then I can go concentrate more on work. I mean, right now I'm working on, believe it or not, I have something I'm working on for Netflix. I have a documentary project that I'm working on, which is amazing. Tango Shalom, I'm waiting to get our music back from Greece, and Skyfighter, I just got a call from the director about a very exciting bit of casting for the feature. So I've got all kinds of stuff happening. And if any of these drop, I might not be able to do these Robservations chats anymore, at least not with the frequency I'm doing them now. So I'm having a good time. So CJ Dunn, maybe I'm doing something right. Dan V900 says the Clone Wars TV show by Filoni was not nearly as good as the comics and other stories. The Battle of Jabim as a version of Vietnam is much better. Look, I agree. And that is true. I'm not saying everything in the Clone Wars was necessarily the best thing in the world, but those 6 seasons of the Clone Wars are pretty great Star Wars. And it was really interesting, and I thought it was great. JB Bonifacio says Rilo, Buffy and Angel. It's poetic like that. Laugh out loud. Yeah, but it's just not that good. I understand what they're doing, but those characters are not. I just don't think they're that good. I understand people love them. I do. There's a girl that I love on Twitter, Allie, that she loves Kylo Ren. There's a lot of people that love Kylo Ren. I get it, but I don't think Kylo Ren is nearly as mythic. And I know he's conflicted. He's a millennial hero, and I get it. Do It for Cash says, greetings from Batu, Rob. The Falcon was amazing. Yes, the Falcon, the J.J. Abrams version of the Millennium Falcon that Disney owns lock, stock, and barrel because it was created under his watch and under Disney's watch. Hands of Stone said, just got my tickets to see the 40th anniversary screening of Star Trek The Motion Picture. Can't wait to see it on the big screen again. I know, it's pretty exciting, isn't it? They're bringing back Star Trek The Motion Picture. I only wish it was the director's edition. Stub McShave said, tomorrow we'll probably get some Wheel of Time news from the writer's room. Don't worry, I'll keep you updated. I know you will. I'm going to read another letter because I think there's a couple of letters. You know what? There's some people who wrote in about Willow Yang, and I'm going to read a couple of letters about Willow Yang. And the first comes from Jeffrey Mao. And for those of you who weren't here yesterday, I read a very heartfelt and very courageous and a great letter from the great Willow Yang. And this comes from Jeffrey Mao, one of two letters. People were very affected by Willow Yang's letter, very, very personal letter from yesterday. And I thank her, first of all, for sharing it with us and sending it in, because it was pretty great. This comes from Jeffrey Mao, who's been writing in a lot lately. Oh, high king of verisimilitude and sanctimonious one, hear me. I read Willow Yang's letter, and parts of it certainly resonated with me, so I wanted to weigh in. Our experiences are certainly different, as we're probably 20 years apart in age, and we grew up in different countries on different coasts. But many of the things she mentioned, specifically about parents being strict about not dating too early and focusing on your studies, is quite true. Part of the reasons why it related to the very important concept of face. Face being loosely defined as honor, dignity, respectability. If you don't have face, then you have nothing. The direct translation of the Chinese word for shame is lose face. You can lose face, but you can also gain it back. For Chinese immigrants living abroad, face is so much more important as their children are growing up in that country and live, play, and go to school with the awai, the Chinese word for the locals, literally meaning old foreigners. Asian immigrant families in general, and Chinese in particular, instill a great importance in education because they feel that is the only advantage that they have in a world where everything else is not in their favor, be it language, connections, another very important Chinese concept called guaxni, and cultural familiarity. The last thing that the parents want is for their children, especially the girls, to be dating. The unspoken meaning is, don't mess around with those white boys, they'll knock you up. That attitude is, of course, quite paternalistic. Sons, and particularly first sons, continue to be highly valued in traditional Asian cultures. When the first son marries, he and his wife are expected to live with his parents and his wife to basically be their maid, cooking and cleaning and caring for them in addition to the couple's own children while she still works outside the home. Bear in mind, this doesn't happen everywhere and in every situation, but it's still certainly a thing. I didn't know much about this growing up, but after getting married to my wife and hearing about stories from her friends in Taiwan and their experiences, I now know why many Taiwanese Chinese women over here marry outside their race. I think they rebel after failed attempts to get set up with a nice boy back home or the son of the parents' friends. Don't get me wrong, this happens on the boys' side as well. Problem being is that this setup comes with everything that I mentioned before. When faced with that, it's no wonder that they look elsewhere, and I don't blame them. My wife and I actually half seriously said we wouldn't want our daughter to marry a Taiwanese guy because of that. And to be honest now, I wouldn't have a problem. Don't get me wrong, I know that the issue with Hapa, people with mixed Asian Pacific Islander heritage, identity struggles is present in this country and among many of our friends who have mixed kids. And I wonder how their lives will turn out as they grow up. To Willow, I would say this. Keep positive and be yourself. You never know what fate has in store for you. I didn't meet my wife until I was 36 years old. We got married a year later, and our son was born a year after. The great curse among many in life is that sometimes you get dealt a bad hand in your appearance. And short of modification surgery, there's not much that you can do to change your base appearance. You can certainly do something, like gain some weight, change your hair, improve your complexion, get vision corrective surgery, fix your teeth. Little things can go a long way. It just takes the confidence and conviction to do so. I hope this was informative and helpful, Many of the things I have said here obviously are not to be taken as a blanket description for all Asian and Chinese immigrant situations. Regionally, things may be quite different, as I'm sure in California, it's probably not like it is back east. Well, thanks for reading, and see you in the Singularity, Jeff Mao. Great letter, Jeff. Great insight. And I'm going to follow that one up with CJ Dunn. CJ Dunn, he's been sending me all these chats today, and this is no, CJ, this is not your surprise, but it is a letter you wrote, and I thought it very much worth sharing because it goes along with what Jeffrey just said. Dear Rob, I was able to catch you live recently, and something caught my complete attention. Willow Yang's letter giving you and us, the Post-Geek Singularity, a look into her psyche. I loved her letter. It touched me in ways that I did not expect. My empathetic levels are going off the charts. I, too, was overweight with a pizza face. I overcompensated for this with an overbearing and confident personality. And after I got through making fun of all the JROTC students, I joined the military. 1 out of 3 of my graduating class. Talk about karma, laugh out loud. The military brought this overconfidence back down to earth. However, my personality is what it is. I'm still confident as fuck. I've been through the shit, as Rob likes to say about military men and women who have been through a lot. But I do not lose my empathy. I feel for the Post-Geek Singularity member Willow. She should not feel the way she does about herself. If this doesn't motivate you, Rob, to talk about our viewer topic I suggested, then I don't know what will. Willow is a remarkably outstanding human being. From what I've heard from her, read by you, she sounds way smarter than me and also a very compassionate person. I love that you, Rob, give her a platform for her remarkable thoughts. Willow is a better person for it. I don't think Willow Yang should be so hard on herself. I find that she is most awesome. We have all had our trials and tribulations. I have struggled with weight myself. The Army helped with that. But I blew up like a blowfish when I would reach drinking age. However, I lost it all. Now I find myself struggling with my weight again now that I have adopted my Dominic. Dad bod is an MFer to get rid of. All I want to say is this. Miss Willow, you have everything in the world to be proud of yourself. We can't all be perfect, so to speak. We all don't see ourselves perfect in our eyes because we know everything about ourselves. Our flaws, our fears, our shortcomings. It's when we acknowledge these things is when we become better people. You, Willow, my friend, are perfect the way you are, and I love you. Thank you, Rob, Willow, and the rest of the Post-Geek Singularity for the awesome chats we can have. I love you all. CJ Dunn. Well, CJ, that's a good letter, and I want to thank you for writing that letter. But you know what? I think Willow's great. I think she's fantastic. I think that she's becoming a molecular biologist and pursuing her PhD. By the way, we've heard no updates on whether or not her piece is getting published in that magazine that I don't know where I can buy a copy of, but I want to buy a copy of it. I don't know if she's heard. But you know what? I think it's great. It's great that we have Willow here, and she's certainly changed my life having her letters and reading in. But you know what? That doesn't change the fact. I think we all need to be mindful of the fact what Willow really needs is to find somebody who's captivated by her, that will ask her out on a proper date, make a plan, say, I really want to take you out. Let's get dressed up. We're going to go to this restaurant. They take her to a nice dinner. You guys drink, whether it's copious amounts of water, wine, whatever. You have a great night, and that night leads to romance, if you know what I'm saying. I think that's what Willow needs. She already knows how cool she is. We know how cool she is. She's heard that from us. She's heard that from me. But what Willow needs really is somebody to sweep her off her feet, ask her out on a date, and a proper date. Not like, hey man, let's why don't we get some coffee? No. Somebody's gonna meet her, get her phone number, tell her I want to take you out, take her to a nice dinner, plan it days in advance, say, this is where we're going. I'm gonna pick you up. Well, maybe actually, you know what, Willow? My dating advice is for the first date, never have somebody pick you up, because meet them. And usually for a first date, for you, I'd say dinner, but you meet somebody, my dating advice is meet somebody in a neutral place. You go show up, do a dinner. Better yet, perhaps a brunch. If you do a brunch, if you meet for brunch, you've got the rest of the day. And if you have some mimosas and there's a spark there, the brunch can turn into an afternoon, which could then turn into an evening. So if somebody asks you out, suggest brunch. That's just me. I haven't dated in a long time, but that's what I would do now. And I think that's what Willow wants. And that's what Willow deserves. You know what I'm saying? And then Willow deserves a boyfriend, somebody who will love and cherish her, as long as she still comes and writes me reviews of Star Trek. That's what I think. So there you go. Now, this is an interesting letter. This is a different letter. Totally different. I love this. This is a follow-up. This comes from longtime supporter and Imagination Connoisseur. Once again, Timbula the Spider Monkey, Tim Davies, all the way from the land down under. And he writes in another letter. If you remember, I talked a little bit about how he showed his girlfriend the 1981 Zulewski film Possession with Isabelle Adjani and Sam Neill that I particularly love. I have a great copy on Blu-ray, the Mondo version that comes in a velour box. So this is from Tim. Hey, Robbo, it's been a while since my last letter, and I thought I should correct this egregious error. Mostly my slackness has been due to work scheduling, but there's been another reason as well. I just couldn't think of a topic to hit you up with. Fortunately, both of those concerns have been abated in one fell swoop. Oh, happy days. A few days ago, I wrote to you a super chat or two about the experience of showing my girlfriend Zulewski's Possession and her extremely negative reaction to it. She really couldn't put her finger on why it stuck in her craw so much, except to say she found it exploitative, especially of Isabelle Adjani, who she assumed was a lot younger than she actually was while making the film. She was shocked to hear Adjani was 26 at the time. To be fair, she does look a lot younger than that. My girlfriend went on to talk about the way Sam comes out looking a lot better than Anna in the film, the latter having her character effectively split into two separate roles. The good girl school teacher and the evil woman who chooses to let her sexuality control her. Oh, man. Well, and is screwing a monster. I don't necessarily agree, but I can see where she's coming from. With a bit more digging, I think I found the core root of the problem she had with the film. My girlfriend is Scottish, and as a child of the 1980s, she lived through the infamous video nasty era. Films were either heavily edited or flat out banned because of our archaic board of stuffy old men couldn't look past the surface of sexual content and violence and unilaterally swung the axe at an entire genre of films. Movies were bad-mouthed and fans of them were seen as degenerates, not just by small groups either. The entire country seemed to be behind this censoring of people's entertainment, for the greater good and all that. One of those films lumped into the video nasty category was Possession, which is ridiculous, especially when you look at some of the other films on the list. Because of the association with being a nasty, I think maybe she wasn't willing to give the movie a fair chance. If true, this is odd because The Evil Dead was also on that list, and she loves that. Basically, The Evil Dead was, I think, one of the instigators of the video nasties. Maybe the combination of being on the list and the sexual nature of the film is what did it. I can't seem to get a straight answer, but she did mention the fact that she knew it was a nasty before we watched it. This got me thinking. Don't judge a book by its cover is something we try and teach children from a very young age. But is a negative first impression something that we still have a hard time getting over? Do we judge things more harshly if we don't think much of it on first exposure? I'm a massive Star Trek fan, and I don't think much of what Bad Robot has done to the franchise, but I have allowed my reaction to the new movies to cloud my But have I allowed my reaction to the new movies cloud my judgment of Star Trek Discovery? For the record, I hate Discovery with a deep, dark passion. I find myself constantly arguing with fans of the new iteration about the state of Trek. People who think like John Campius does, who say things like, before JJ, the franchise was dead. To them, I always quote Judge Crandall from Pet Sematary. Sometimes dead is better, especially if what you get back is a grotesque charade of its former self. But am I being overly harsh towards the new show because of my feelings about the movies? I'd like to think I viewed Discovery free from any preconceived ideas on what it was going to be like and just disliked it because of its individual qualities or lack thereof, as did I. To follow on from a discussion the other day on your show, I won't be watching the Watchmen series based solely on my feelings about the way DC handled their interactions with Alan Moore. But if I did watch it, would I be able to approach it with an open mind? I doubt it. As I've previously stated, Alan Moore is my spirit animal. I've written to Hot Toys about making a 6-scale figure of him, but don't think they or he would go for that. There wouldn't be enough fake hair to make even a small run of those figures. Yeah, but you know what? The new Erasmus Super Deluxe Gandalf figure could be resculpted to become Alan Moore. I never thought about that, but now you have to drop $300 for times 2 to get the Gandalf figure and to make the Alan Moore figure. On the flip side of this, are those examples of something you watch? On the flip side of this, are those examples of something you watched that you were overly excited about, and as a result, you may have given it a far easier ride than it deserved? I was extremely excited for the new Star Wars when Disney announced The Force Awakens. I saw it 10 times at the cinema. I bought the standard and 3D Blu-rays when they came out, as did I. It wasn't until just recently I was able to admit to myself and others that my enthusiasm may have been misplaced, and the movie isn't really all that good. I may have just been happy it wasn't a prequel. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this matter. Do you think the power, both positive and negative, of a first impression is something we can ever truly get over? Anywho, I'm going to leave off here as I always do with a Groucho Marx quote. Marriage is a wonderful institution, but who wants to live in an institution? Timbula the spider monkey. Well, Tim, that's a great question. Great, something we will debate. Look, I think that Star Wars in particular and The Force Awakens, everybody I don't think there was a movie made in the history of Hollywood that we all wanted to love the way we wanted to love The Force Awakens. I have friends of mine that I consider to be normally very, very intelligent people whose tastes I usually admire that adore The Force Awakens. Now, a lot of them have kids. I do not. I didn't like it the first time I saw it. But I think that, yes, we all want to love Star Wars. Star Wars is something, who doesn't love Star Wars? I know there's always going to be some contrarian going, I don't love Star Wars. Fine. You can be that way. I understand. I do. But it's like I went through high school. I talked to the drama kids. I understand. Everyone thumbs their nose at some things. I get it. I do. Go work in a coffee shop the rest of your life. No, I'm just kidding. But I think the world wanted to love Star Wars. We just want to love Star Wars. We do. We want Star Wars to be good, because why wouldn't it be good? But we do want it to be good. I wanted it to be good. I want Star Trek to be good. And when I watch things and they're not good, it bums me out. I think there are things. I have found myself, the movies that I love, I watch them over and over and over again. And I find out, especially when I take a break, like I haven't watched Raiders of the Lost Ark for a while, even though I own, of course, the Blu-rays. Every time I watch Raiders of the Lost Ark, I'm like, you know what? This movie is so good. And why is it so good? It's all character and story. And for me, I think my favorite movies, the movies I love the most, are those movies where the characters in them are so just indelible. They're my friends. And I like going to visit them. And in one of my favorite movies, one of the characters, even in the movie, addresses this. The great Penny Lane, played by Kate Hudson, who actually, during the making of the movie, I heard that Cameron Crowe thought he made a big mistake casting her. I love the long version of Almost Famous, the bootleg cut, as it were, untitled. It's called the untitled version. I love Almost Famous, but in that movie, Kate Hudson talks about, you can go to the record store and visit your friends. I feel that way about movies. And all of my favorite movies, whether it's All That Jazz and Joe Gideon, or DeMille and Cecile, The Angels and Wim Wenders, Wings of Desire, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. But I go back and I watch these films, The Godfather, The Corleone Family. the movie's all about Eve, Betty Davis, and her cohorts. I love George Sanders. I wish they would have made a spin-off All About Eve movie just about Addison DeWitt. Network, all of my favorite movies that I could watch countless times. I never get tired of watching them. The Hunt for Red October, that my girlfriend Elizabeth thinks is boring. I could watch Hunt for Red October like every night. I love it so much because I love all the characters. When I go back and I watch these movies, they never bore me. They never get tired. I never get there's always something I find to delight me. I just love them so much. And there's something I was going to discuss. As a matter of fact, you know what? That brings me to another topic. No, I'm going to save it for tomorrow. I'm going to save it for tomorrow because it's too big of a topic. But yeah, I mean, usually the stuff that I really love, if I come back and rediscover it later, it truly is as great as I thought it was. Now, do I judge books by their cover? Sometimes, or I judge movies by their cover that I haven't seen. I think a lot of us do. And we miss out on some good stuff. There's a lot of people that just immediately like your girlfriend. Possession is not an easy movie to like. It is not a traditional narrative. If you did not grow up watching, like I tell people, I love Michelangelo Antonioni's movies. And I was just reading Ari Aster talking about what movies were you influenced by with Midsummer, and the director of The Witch and Ari Aster were talking about they love Bergman films and all that. None of the movies that they were talking about were your traditional horror films. And I thought it was a little pretentious, but that's fine because I love their movies. But a lot of the movies that I love, like I was talking about the Ennui trilogy, La Notte, La Ventura, and The Eclipse. Very few people I know, and I'm sure very few people out there. I defy any of you to put on La Ventura and come back and tell me, "Oh my God, I love that movie. It was so good," because it doesn't present a story in the traditional way and all the things that we Imagination Connoisseurs love. We are not being given those movies anymore. And I was talking to somebody about this. I think a lot of the movies that come out today, like most of the movies that I watch, they're good. They're good. There's a lot of good movies, but there are few movies that I truly think are great, that transcend. There's a lot of good stuff out there, but there's very few things that transcend what they are and make me want to watch them over and over again, the way some of the classic movies are. Now, I don't know why that is, but Possession is not a movie that you can. It's a horror film for sure. It's unexpected for sure. It's like all great horror movies. It's about something else. It's about the disillusion of a marriage. It's about how two people can be cruel to one another, how love can drive a man to distraction, and what it's like when a woman falls out of love with you and metaphorically, well, or not metaphorically, finds a lover that can satisfy her the way you never could. What drives a man more insane than that? I watched a movie I had never seen before that I'd heard about. I even owned the book, but never. I read the first couple chapters, never finished it. Juliet Naked, that's based on a book by the same author that About a Boy and High Fidelity were by. And Rose Byrne and Chris O'Dowd, Rose Byrne and Chris O'Dowd and Ethan Hawke. I really loved it. And it wasn't perfect, but I really enjoyed it. It almost got to classic status for me, but I would say, it was good. I really enjoyed it. I would watch it again. It made me want to get the Blu-ray and keep it in my collection. I really did enjoy the film. But Possession is, I think, one of the great horror movies ever made. I think about 20% of the people watching this live chat now would love it as much as I do, and nor would I expect them to. The same way you wouldn't love the Ennui trilogy the way I do. It's hard, Anyway, I'm going to read another letter. Well, actually, let's see if anybody is talking in the chats and see. Well, I know you guys are. You have lots to say, which is great. CJ Dunn. CJ Dunn says, Dad bod is an MFer. Laugh out loud. Still working on it. Yeah, I'm not even a dad. I kind of am a pseudo dad, but I got to work on that too. JB Bonifacio says Raiders was nominated for Best Picture. Wow. And why should it not? In 1981, Raiders of the Lost Ark was one of the greatest movies that came out. And it still is. And, it's funny. That movie just works. That movie's you've got great character and great plot and great action. It's a synthesis of just all around greatness. I love it. I love it. Cal, all the way from Malaysia. Cal from he of Swag Props. He who made me this prop replica of the 9 gates from the 9th gate itself. Man, I love this thing so much. I just sit here all day long and somebody's barking. I sit here all day long and play with this book. I love this book so much. So in our discussion of villains yesterday, Cal is weighing in from Swag Props. Go check out his Etsy page. What are you guys barking? Why are you barking? Barking because Sophie is home from school. Sophie, who you met, of course, on our Comic-Con live chats. Cal says, hi, Rob. Watching a stream on the subject of cinematic monsters yesterday made me wonder, is there an older monster that has haunted the big and small screens alike? Is there an older monster that has haunted the big and small screens alike more than the devil, a.k.a. Satan, a.k.a. Lucifer, a.k.a. the Prince of Darkness? After all, humanity has been preoccupied with the devil, or at least the concept of him, since roughly 2000 BCE. He has been a key figure in countless poems, plays, novels throughout history, and there's a long list of movies which demonically play on our obsession with mankind's oldest enemy, and it is not hard to fathom why. Since the release of The Exorcist in 1973, which scared us in a way we've never been scared before, movies which dealt with the devil court a fascination within us which is without equal. Just like his scriptural persona, he has worn many faces and taken many forms in movies and TV shows with such A-listers like De Niro, Pacino, Hoffman, Gabriel Byrne, and even non-A-listers like Elizabeth Hurley portraying the character. Has there ever been a cinematic villain that has been played by so many actors throughout the history of film? Probably not. Choosing the devil as a character on film presents filmmakers with all sorts of intriguing choices. Will he spew fire and brimstone or leave his threats implied? Will he snarl and threaten to seduce or cajole? With each film and actor, different interpretations and unique styles have been used to flesh out the devil, so much so he's pretty much a pop culture icon, just like he is a scriptural one. Just look at the popularity of shows like Lucifer and Supernatural, and you'll realize what a unique character he can be in the hands of the right writers and filmmakers. Also in The Sandman, but that's where Lucifer came from. There's a plethora of the Lucifer on TV came from The Sandman. There's a plethora of films featuring the devil, ranging from excellent to downright bad. Some of my favorites include The Omen, Prince of Darkness, Rosemary's Baby, Angel Heart, The Devil's Advocate, and even Constantine, which features Peter Stormare as Lucifer looking like a junkie who is overdosed on depravity, and every pore on the deathly pallor of his skin seems to ooze corruption and vice. But of all those representations in films, there are 2 that I can call my favorite. The first is a movie that both you and I hold dear, Roman Polanski's The 9th Gate. Although the devil is not the principal antagonist, which in this film is Boris Balkan, played by Frank Langella, he plays a pivotal role in the proceedings. It is the book that he inspired that is the film's MacGuffin, and his presence is strongly felt in the background, although it has been argued that the girl, played by Emmanuel Sanger, is actually the devil, or at least a representation of him. Johnny Depp's Corso evidently becomes the one the devil deems worthy enough to solve the mystery of the 9 gates, as Corso is protected and guided by him throughout the film. It doesn't exactly have the most clear-cut ending, but I like the fact it opened the question of Corso's fate to the audience interpretation. I certainly thought the film was better than its source material, Arturo Perez Reverdi's Reverdi, the Club Dumas, which, while it was a good book, can get a bit convoluted at times. I think the movie's way better, by the way. The other favorite of mine is Gregory Wyden's The Prophecy, which to me is a terribly underrated film. I have a love for stories that feature angels and demons battling for humanity, and The Prophecy is definitely high on my list. Christopher Walken as the Archangel Gabriel has rebelled against God, and he's a delight to watch. But it is the brilliant, albeit brief, performance of Viggo Mortensen as Lucifer that is one of the film's highlights. Mortensen is brilliantly both endearing and creepy as the Prince of Darkness, as well as having some of the best lines in a film, chock full of great quotes. It is too bad the sequels were supremely mediocre and were just painful to watch, but fortunately, The Prophecy is great enough to enjoy as a standalone film. Whatever form he may take in films, there is no doubt that the devil is one of, if not the greatest of all cinematic monsters. Yours sincerely, Cal, aka Swack Props. Well, Cal, I agree with you. I love the devil as a protagonist. One of my dream film projects that I want to make, that I've wanted to make for over 30 years now, features the devil as a primary, as the antagonist. And I would cast Richard E. Grant. He who was nominated for an Academy Award. We will see Richard E. Grant in The Rise of Skywalker. I want him to play the devil in my dream project. And I hope to one day make it. But I'll have to make one more movie first before I can even consider making that movie. We shall see. But, I think the devil is irresistible. We in the Western world, all worlds really, there are devils in all different kinds of religions. But I think, of course, in the Western world, Old Scratch, Satan himself, the underworld, the promise that we might end up in hell where we're going to meet the devil, which I think is ultimately pretty silly. It's funny to me that the afterlife has always been portrayed as being a place, like with real estate. I always thought that was sort of strange. As we learn more about the cosmos, I think those ideas will go by the wayside. But the devil is a great antagonist. When the devil is portrayed by Al Pacino, I'm a fan of man. I'm down here with my nose to the grindstone. I love that. I mean, I love the devil's. The Devil's Advocate is so good. The Exorcist is great. Angel Heart is great. Constantine is great. I love movies. The Prophecy is great. I love the devil. The devil is a great, great, great character. And different portrayals of the devil are a lot of fun. And look, he's the ultimate monster that is also lovable. If the devil's portrayed by a great actor or a great actress, you can't help but love the devil because we all secretly, Milton. It's like it's like what Donald Sutherland said in Animal House. Was Milton? I can't do it, Donald Sutherland. Was Milton trying to tell us that being bad was more fun than being good, or is as much fun as being good? Then he chomps his apple or whatever. Milton was trying to tell us that. Anyway, that's a great letter, and I thank you for writing in. I've been getting a lot of letters about what people thought about our discussion about great villains in movies. And I think the devil, when properly portrayed, is the greatest villain in the movie, because how do you defeat the devil? CJ Dunn says, Rob, I have no excuse. I just passed the buck on Dom. CJ Dunn says, that's my son, by the way. I should be in better shape. However, the military does shave years off your body. Yeah, we should all be in better shape, but the thing is, having a great body requires, look, it is not hard to get in shape. It isn't. It's very easy. Great nutrition. You have to start with great nutrition. That's 80% of your battle, 75% of your battle. Great nutrition combined with exercise. And when I say great nutrition, I mean it. You have to eat well, you have to eat properly, and you have to exercise. And the problem is, you have to do both of those things. You have to just choose to do them. It's really hard. Well, I'm just let me just have this salad dressing. No, it doesn't work that way. But yes. And when you have kids and your kid's son's name is Dom, did you name him after the Fast and the Furious franchise? But I think, yes. Dad bods are hard to get rid of, and our metabolism slows down. And when we get older, but you know what? A good CrossFit group, along with proper nutrition. The last time Elizabeth and it was over, I don't know, let's say a little over a year ago, we did a 6-week plan. I lost 30 pounds in 6 weeks. I mean, we diligently ate exactly the way we were supposed to, didn't drink, worked out, and exercised and ate right. Melts off. But that's tough to do. Yeah. So we'll see. And I got more. You know what? I've got another. Since CJ, you know what? You sent in 2 letters. Since you're there, since you've been sending me a lot of super chats today, I'm gonna read this letter because I think this letter is really, really good. Even though, now I warn you all. This letter, CJ Dunn's letter, it's a little political and talks about, gun control. But I'm going to read it because why not? Dear Rob, I wanted to write you this letter due to current events coupled with my conversation my dad and I recently had. As you know, and I've stated before, my dad is more of a conservative and I am more of a liberal. We find middle ground, my dad and I, more often than not, and agree more often than we disagree. Mostly, we agree or agree to disagree. Given the recent events in El Paso, I was once stationed there and I love the food and the people. Dayton, Ohio, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, I thought I'd share some comments on the topic. My dad has expressed valid concerns about gun control. I agree, there should be gun control. But the way you have expressed how people should have to obtain them, Rob, if people in the military can't join without an extensive psych evaluation, then no one should be able to purchase a gun without one. The reason why the military has such an extensive mental evaluation is because they, the military, put rifles in the hands of individuals and asks them to use those guns responsibly. That includes protecting the men and women standing to your left and to your right. You can't do that if you are mentally unsound. If it's discovered you are not mentally capable after your initial evaluation, you will find yourself out of the Army. This includes simple mishaps and incidents of misconduct as well, which might be considered a lower standard than mental instability. My dad asked me a simple question that I had to stop and think about for a second. Before I get to that question, I have to mention that the media and even he have pointed out some blame at movies and video games. That seems to be a classic throwaway excuse when unspeakable acts of violence touch us as society to our core. People in the media shoot, no pun intended, straight to video games and violent movies when it comes to assigning blame. With all that said and out of the way, my dad asked me, "Son, you have been through and seen a lot of the atrocities that comes with the experience of war. What would drive someone to just act out of violence in such a way? What would or could make someone do that to others without any consideration or thoughts of consequences?" I have to say I was ready and quick to rebut most of this humble debate, but I had to stop and collect myself on this one. So after careful consideration, I answered my father with one word: socialization. He answered, "What do you mean?" My response to my father is as follows: "Well, Dad, socialization is what defines us to our core. It's what influences our decisions and makes our decision-making process what it is. At the core of socialization are parents. I blame parents first and foremost. I'll use myself as an example. You allowed me to watch the original RoboCop when I was 5, which has some really gory depictions of violence among other very adult themes that a 5-year-old really has no business watching, let alone understand. But you can't just underestimate the abilities of a child's understanding. I still, to this day, appreciate and understand that movie. Also, we can't just stop at RoboCop. You allowed me to play violent video games or watch violent or just flat-out adult-themed movies. You always made sure that I knew it was just make-believe, derived from someone's imagination, and that it was not how the real world works. You always taught me the value of respect and the value of treating others with respect, and that violence is never the answer unless I'm backed into a corner and have no other choice but to protect myself or others. Fast forward to my own deployments. When faced with decisions that would take others' lives, even if I felt threatened, I always thought before I pulled the trigger. More often than not, I waited until I was being shot at or I was sure they were a threat. I instantly thought of these things because of you, Dad. It was you who taught me, what if the shoe were on the other foot? Was a constant saying, teaching you always made a point of discussion. That saying is one word, Pop, and that word is empathy. In the instances of trigger hesitation, I could only think that if it were me, what if I was coming home from after taking my kids to a mosque and my kids were acting up in the back seat? So I take my eyes off the road, only not paying attention for a military roadblock from another country's occupying military. And that military shoots my whole family up because of my negligence. Now, would I want to be that guy who pulled the trigger? That, Dad, is because of you. And that is why parents, not video games or movies, is why atrocities such as mass shootings or any idiotic thought is carried out. There's more to it than just that. I'm only saying that parents are a very important part of our core social makeup, and the thought process starting from a very early age. The conversation goes on, but I can pick it up in another letter. I just wanted to share my thoughts on the recent tragedies and how we can't put all the blame, or even a lot of blame, on artistic fantasies. Love you and the Post-Geek Singularity, Rob, and thank you for all of this awesome community. And thank you all for this awesome community. CJ Dunn. Well, CJ, yes, that was an overtly political letter. And you know what? I wasn't going to read it, but since I keep seeing your name popping up, why not? It was a great letter to read. And it's not necessarily a topic. Here's how I will turn this around. I'm going to turn the whole gun debate into what I think, and it feeds in. I agree with your letter. I think one of the downsides of our current civilization, one of the downsides of social media, there are many upsides, but one of the downsides of social media and where we're at as a people is it's very easy to not think about the reality of other people. If there's one thing, I mean, I'm not saying I'm some kind of an evangelist or that I am a crusader. My only crusade is for verisimilitude in popular entertainment. My only crusade is to be being given the best transfers on physical media that I can enjoy. But actually, my real crusade is to make everyone in the world an imagination connoisseur and to understand that the power of storytelling, there's no other medium other than storytelling that can help us understand one another more than the tales that we tell each other. Whether they're stories that are real about what happened to you today, or whether you're watching a great movie, there are no better ways to understand each other and the rest of humanity than the stories we tell. That's my goal in life, is to make sure that the stories that we're telling each other, whether they're in the movies or on television, or whether they're just over the internet right now, that these stories can be the best they can be because they give us the best insight into who we are. And that's why I say it's important that everybody has a story to tell. I have to tell you, one of the joys, I've been taking a lot of Lyft, I've been ride sharing or just taking Lyft's places. I love chatting with my Lyft drivers. I've never had the same Lyft driver twice, which is strange to me because I live in the same area, but because the way California works, Lyft drivers are all over the place. But I love talking to Lyft drivers. I've actually met some people that have followed me on Twitter, and we continue talking with one another. And I think the biggest problem, whatever happens, is, and we know from studies in terms of psychopathy and things like that, that there are people that have a lack of empathy. And a lack of empathy is where it begins. So the word, when you talk about empathy, you're absolutely right, that there are people, whether you have narcissistic personality disorder, there are people that actually have a screw loose. And I believe that. They lack empathy. But there are also people that learn to forget about empathy. It is very easy to become, when you become radicalized, and when I say radicalized, I don't just mean radicalized through fundamentalist religious ideology or any kind of ideology, but when you become radicalized, it is very easy to hate when you don't have to deal with people face to face on a daily basis. When you don't see mothers with children, and you don't see people going to and from work, and you're not interacting with human beings on a daily basis. And I think the people who lack empathy can become dangerous, obviously. But I think that one of the downsides of social media is you can fall into rabbit holes where you can become radicalized through ideology because you're not hearing it necessarily in the real world. You create your own world that you can descend into via social media and talk to people on message boards and hide behind the anonymity of a screen name or whatever. And that anonymity and that sort of those things make you lose your tether to the real world is clipped. And a lot of that anger, I read, there's a great book on Columbine, and you read, and also it also is insular too. It's not just, you're not alone. You can find other like-minded people, and you get so enamored and so drowned in your own ideology that it becomes all consuming, and it strips you of your empathy. And I think that's the problem that we have. We have a whole generation of young people. If you look at all the shooters, so many of these men are in their 20s, and they have a lot of the similar traits. And the question is, why do they have these traits? And I think a lot of it has to do with whether let's take a lot of the drugs out of the equation, the prescription drugs that are part of it, and all of that. But I do think it is ultimately a lack of empathy. I mean, this is a relatively new phenomenon, and I think we need to be looking at it on a three-dimensional level. And saying it's about violent video games. Look, I love violent video games. I love Call of Duty. I love blowing up the Empire. I love shooting TIE fighters out of the sky. There's a pilot in each one, and but I have never, as a result of a video game, ever had a thought of picking up a just like when I go see the Fast and the Furious movies. I used to like to drive when I had my Toyota Supra. I used to love to drive on Mulholland, and basically I didn't know what drifting was, but it was sort of a vague form of drifting. I used to drive on Mulholland Boulevard at 3 o'clock in the morning, at 100 miles an hour if I could. But watching Fast and Furious movies does not make me want to go drive fast cars in the middle of a city and put people in harm's way. I don't think any kind of, I don't think people can talk about how you desensitize people, but the thing is, I don't think movies that have violence in them are necessarily glorifying violence per se. I mean, when you're watching Call of Duty, it's set up that there's an enemy. You're at war. When I was playing Onimusha and killing demons and hacking them apart with swords and things, I think it's a scapegoat. I think what we really have to do is like you just said in your letter, it's all about empathy. How do we stop? We have to remember, people forget that there's a human being at the end of every one of these bullets. Every trigger that's pulled, there's a human being at the other end, and that human being has lives, and that human being has family, and that human being has people. And we in America, because we're not the only country that has video games and guns, and yet we're the only country that has these kinds of mass shootings. And there is something unique to America that we need to start examining. And it isn't just the guns. Guns are just tools. It's the people that we have picking up guns and using them in this manner. And there is no easy answer to this. And I think the problem is, as I say all the time, three-dimensional. But anyway, I am not an expert. And I certainly agree with you. Just like with the military, I'm a staunch supporter of a 6-month period of time where you achieve or you receive gun training, psychological evaluation, or what have you. Make guns. If you want to obtain guns, it's exactly how you obtain a driver's license. What's so hard about that? Whenever I hear people object, no, you can't have it that way. I'm like, why? Where I've never heard a decent answer about that. I've never heard a decent answer. Why shouldn't it take 6 months to get a gun? I mean, unless hunting season's coming along and the only source of food you have is the food you shoot. But that's not true of most people. But anyway, I don't get it. But it's a good letter, and hearing about it from one of our veterans who can speak so eloquently about it, I think that is good. Anyway, yeah. So I think actually that we're coming to the end of this chat. I think the chat. I know there's some people that I haven't quite got to their chats, but I'm going to get to them. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you. I know there's still some chats I haven't answered. But yeah, it's funny talking about gun control. Everybody talks about it. It's tough. It's I'm not qualified, but my whole thing is like, just make a gun license. Like I've never understood, why is that so difficult? And why don't we just admit Americans love guns? We love guns. That's all we love guns. We like shooting guns. And you know what? I also believe that I think secretly, no one's really going to admit this, but we Americans, we all want to be in a position of being John Wayne, John Wayne, Marshall Dillon. We all want to ride in, as gun owners. And I used to be a gun owner. I used to own a 9mm, Smith & Wesson 9mm semi-automatic. I loved my gun. I could take it apart and put it back together. I never fired it once. I owned a gun for about 4 years, never fired it once, never even took it to a shooting range. But I had it, and I certainly knew how to take it apart and put it back together again. But I think Americans, we uniquely believe somewhere in the back of our psyches that, you need to own a gun because one day you're going to be the hero. You're going to be the hero that's going to ride in and save somebody. Who knows? CJ Den says, I did. Rob family. The next kid is getting named Han, boy or girl. Really, CJ, you named your son after Dominic Toretto? That's awesome. CJ Dunn says, don't forget about that surprise, Rob. I will write a letter about quite literally putting the shoe on the other foot, walking a mile in someone else's shoes. Funny, but a great story about empathy. Please do. Wade O'Neill says, RE Politics. If Tulsi Gabbard doesn't get the Democratic nomination, she should star in action movies. We need new action stars. Hey, man, Tulsi Gabbard, who serves our country, who's leaving the campaign trail to go participate. Where is she going? I believe she's going to Malaysia to participate in military exercises. Tulsi Gabbard is doing that. It's funny. It's funny to me. You have someone like Tulsi Gabbard who served the country, who has also been a congresswoman, worked in government, and then she goes into the race, and then everybody wants to tear her apart. Well, you met with Assad. And she's like, yes, I believe we should have a diplomatic solution to these problems. I went and met with Assad. And people are like going, it's not like she took up arms and decided to use chemical weapons against the Syrian people. It's crazy. We live in a crazy world. Do I love Tulsi Gabbard? I don't know enough about Tulsi Gabbard, but I know a little bit about her. And it's to see what happens to her, what Americans do to other Americans. I mean, my God, unbelievable. Where's the respect? That's what we really are missing. CJ Dunn said, you had me at Toyota Supra, and did you mention Onimusha? You are a man after my heart. Man, I love Onimusha. Sabanosuke. I love Onimusha. The franchise, Onimusha 3, when Jean Reno was there and we went into Paris, it got a little shark jumpy. But yes, I loved Onimusha, and I love Devil May Cry. Still do. But I liked all those things. But yes, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring this chat to a close. I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank you for all of your support to the channel. Please go to the Burnettwork.net. And if you want to comment on these letters, please do. If you want to comment on these chats, please do at YouTube, obviously below in the chat. I want to thank my moderators, the Honorable Mike Bodden, who is the mayor of Riverdale, Iowa. That is true, people. Your moderator is absolutely a real, bona fide, genuine mayor who goes and speaks to conferences of other mayors in Washington, D.C. We've got Detective Jim. Yes, Jim was a real police detective. He is retired now and currently is not in possession of an American passport. Are you, Jim? But we want to thank him for also being a great moderator. And the great Greg Smith, who, yes, built his own house with his own bare hands. Your moderator, Greg Smith, built his own house. Yes, he did. Anyway, I want to thank them for moderating. I want to thank Lucky Tiger Men's Grooming Products for those men who want to look good and feel great for sponsoring these chats. And if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com, you can punch in PGS when you check out and get 20% off your order. But don't forget, Lucky Tiger is having the Lucky Tiger Tailgater giveaway. The Tailgater giveaway. It's not sweepstakes, giveaway. It's happening right now. It's happening right now. If you go to clubluckytiger.com, or you go to getluckytiger.com, or you look at our Twitter feeds and things, you can enter. You can enter now. You can win over $500, including a grill of swag it'll make you the ultimate tailgater. You can go to as football season is ramping up. By the way, lest we forget, the Seahawks did win their first game. I know it's preseason, but the Jedi Knights of the Pacific Northwest, they won their game against Denver as well. They should, by God. Seahawks going all the way this year. They're looking great. Uncle Pete, he's the Legion of Boom may be gone, but Uncle Pete and the Jedi Knights of the Pacific Northwest are eternal. Go Hawks. Anyway, you can go get the Lucky Tiger Tailgater giveaway if you sign up. So go to clubluckytiger.com or getluckytiger.com. You don't even have to buy anything. Just sign up. But if you do get there, buy things and then write Alan Murphy an email that says I sent you and you bought Lucky Tiger product. And as I said, I don't have facial hair and they've got great stuff. But anyway, most of all, I want to thank you, the Post-Geek Singularity community, members of this, you Imagination Connoisseurs and members of this community. You make it great. I think it's getting better every day. I mean, I might not be getting better every day, but you guys are, and the community that we're building is very interesting. Please hit like, subscribe if you haven't already. I've noticed the subscribers to non-subscribers has been going up. I want to thank Swag Props once again for sending me this, his prop replica of the 9 Gates, and his letter about Satan. Because you know what? Satan will never go out of style because he's a great character. Anyway, I want to thank you all. And remember, I've said it before in this chat, but every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I'm going to bid you farewell. And what do I say always? I always say, well, have a better day, which I'm going to say soon. I should be back on the John Campea show tomorrow if he's back at 9 a.m. And then I will be back here tomorrow at 1. So now I will say, as always, have a better day. So goodbye, all. Thank you all for being here. It's been another great barn burner of a chat. If you want to send me letters, send them into the Burnettwork.net. I got more letters. I got more letters than I know what to do with. We're being inundated with letters, which is great. And I'm glad you all appreciate the content. I'm actually, in terms of our moderator, Greg Smith, I'm going to break apart the first episode of Robservations. And Greg shows us his beautiful cosplay of Boba Fett, also a Rebel flight suit, and his 1-to-1 scale land speeder. I'm going to put those up as individual clips so you can see those, because that's from Robservations 1 way back, almost a year ago. It was a year ago we shot it. It was over a year ago, Greg. Can you believe it that we shot you? Anyway, I'm going to bring this chat to a close. And I will say, once again, have a better day. And thank you for being here and supporting the channel.